Hello, and welcome everybody to the second iteration of Altering, Shifting, Communing, a conversation series presented by Call for Curators. So I'm Ilaria Conti, the curator of the series, and I'm here with Natasha Becker. Hello, Natasha. Thank you very much for being here today. This is the second event of a new conversation series that is presented every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Central European Time. And it is a series that comes from the awareness that this is a crucial time to come together and to support each other as professionals, but also as individuals. So what we want to do with this series is try to create a long-term digital space to rethink critically and politically our work, to think about what we do in communal terms, and support practices of care and sustainable practices. And by sustainable, I do not mean only in financial terms. So what we're striving for is to really bring forward not only interesting topics, but also helpful ideas, tools, and strategies, and also amplify the work of others through the speakers invited. So we will have approximately a 40-minute conversation. In the meantime, feel free to ask any questions to Natasha through the comment section, and also share resources and also connect with one another through that. And if you want, I encourage you all also to connect with us via email to share ideas and feedback. And here is our email address. So as I said, I will gather questions for Natasha and field them toward the end of the conversation. But for now, let's just jump right in, introduce Natasha, who is an independent curator and one of the co-founders of Assembly Room, which is a curatorial platform for art and advocacy based in New York. And I would also like to say hello to Julia Topci and Paola Gallio, the other founders of Assembly Room, who couldn't be here with us today. So Natasha has spent the last 16 years living and working between Cape Town and New York. She's originally from South Africa, and her curatorial work is focused on, and I read here, bringing visibility to contemporary artists from the global African diaspora. So you can find Natasha's full biography on our website, which is callforcurators.com/talks. But let's just get started with Natasha. So Natasha, thanks again for being with us today. I really appreciate it. I tend to start this conversation series with a very sort of personal and average, I would say, everyday question, which is, how are you? How you've been through this very complex and kind of unique months? And just if you want to also introduce yourself in your own words.
Thank you, Ilaria, and thank you so much for inviting Assembly Room and for having me today, and for creating the space for us to gather and to share and to communicate and support each other. And thank you also to everyone who has signed up and joined us for this conversation. I'm very excited to be here on behalf of Assembly Room. I'm good, and I actually think I'm better than good, in the sense that, you know, I'm healthy, my family's healthy, everyone I know, all the people in my life are healthy, and I think that's the most important thing. So I feel that for those reasons, I feel I'm better than good. I know, you know, I know people who have been affected by the pandemic, and so I feel very grateful for that. And I'm energized, you know, by all these challenges, and I'm energized by the social protests. I'm energized by, you know, the conversations that are happening in the art world around equality and justice for people of color, for women, and how the two, you know, are connecting. How, you know, the ripple effect of the police violence and the protests against police violence in the United States has caused this ripple to spread throughout society and culture. And so I feel energized by that. You know, I think many of us have been fighting these fights and having these struggles for a long time. And we have these moments, you know, of activity and activism and energy and we should all be, fed and nourished and supported by that, because I think that it's very much a lifelong struggle for us to achieve equality and, for us to improve our institutions and our social and our political institutions and our art institutions. So for me, moments like this are very energizing for that reason, because in between, there are lots of people still quietly going about doing this work, and I think, I hope we get a boost from that rather than, become overwhelmed by it, as to feel the difficulty of it and the complexity and the sadness and all those feelings. But for me, I also feel very energized by that.
So I'm very, very grateful for this kind of synergy, because I think it's a wonderful time to speak with you, to speak with Assembly Room, for the amazing work that you always do, as you were sort of highlighting. It's a daily effort and it's daily activism. So let's just dive right into with the very first sort of basic and very broad question of who is Assembly Room? Like, what is Assembly Room, but also who is Assembly Room, and how did it start, and when did it start?
Assembly Room started in 2018, September 2018, and that's when we opened, and it feels like we've been around for 5 years, but in fact, we've only been around for about 2 years. And I think that's just because once we opened, we gathered a lot of momentum, and, things sort of snowballed from there. But, the word assembly means a group of people gathered together in one place for a common cause, and that's really at the heart of Assembly Room. That it's a meeting, a congregation, a rally, a gathering, and a space, a physical space, a metaphorical space, a symbolic space for women of all backgrounds, gender non-conforming, non-binary women, everyone or anyone who identifies as women, to gather. And that was the impetus for the founding of the organization. And as individual curators living in New York City who were also foreigners and coming from, different countries, we would meet informally before we launched in Assembly Room, and we'd have these once a month dinners at Julia's house, or at a restaurant in the East Village called Entwine, or, at a friend who's a fashion designer at her studio, and we'd just kind of rove around the city and have these monthly meetings. And it was really just about informality and hospitality and gathering and sharing on a regular basis, rather than, trying to schedule a lunch with someone or a dinner with someone or a call or whatever. It's New York City, everybody's busy, but we gathered, momentum, and we decided, well, let's formalize this in some way. And we took our cue from the women who we just invited, people I knew, Julia, etc. And so it was just a very informal group that gathered, and they, people could come and people could go, but we found that there was always a core group gathering together, and so we continued. And so when we opened in 2018, in September of 2018, we'd found this perfect little space. It was just enough on the Lower East Side, and it was literally a room about 300 square feet. And it was very cozy, and, we just felt an immediate connection with that space too. And so we opened with an exhibition, and our September curatorial meeting of women took place at Assembly Room. And that became one of our core programs, this monthly curator meetup. And this was really at the heart of our mission: hospitality and community, sharing, fellowship, informality and fun, and also inviting other speakers and other people doing interesting things in the arts, new young organizations, other curators, and we had that mix of just informal guests and, you know, have some wine, have some snacks, and just hang out in the gallery and chat. And so Assembly Room is self-organized. You know, it really takes inspiration from, I mean, there are many examples in the arts and in, you know, various social political movements of just, you know, a kind of grassroots, do-it-yourself sort of attitude, you know, and it, I guess it sprang out of this need that we felt as women who, you know, were working in various ways in the arts, living in an international city, a city that, you know, has this incredible cosmopolitanism and energy and competitiveness and culture, etc., that we all contribute to. You know, we New York City's diversity and internationalism is created by everyone who, you know, moves to the city and participates and lives in the city and forms a community there. And so for us, it was about finding our, you know, our space, our place where we belong in this larger culture, and building the organization around that connection, connecting with each other, connecting with other, you know, women and other immigrants, and, you know, just, I guess, connecting around our insider-outsider sort of identities, you know, but also around art and around curating and around, you know, the vital discussions, the Me Too movement. You know, it was just 18 months ago that was a prime focus of discussion in the national debates here in the United States. And that, I remember, was when we launched, you know, and so here 18 months later, we are at this moment of incredible, you know, social protest against racism and violence and the injustices of that system. And it's hard even to remember, you know, that 18 months ago we were facing these huge questions around, you know, violence against women and the abuse and sexual misconduct on all levels of society. You know, so I think this last 2 years has really exposed just, you know, so much inequality and so much abuse of power, and, you know, and just how vulnerable we are out there, right? Because we work independently, or we work for organizations, or we work for institutions, and we are all vulnerable, you know, to this structure and to this imbalance. And so really supporting each other and getting together once a month, I think, was just like food for our souls, you know, to do the work that we do. And that's really the heart of the organization and the mission.
I think you touched on so many important, really urgent points, like the radicality of informality, which is something that I always want to bring forward, like to make it explicit, because I think it's a strategy that we need to make our own more and more often and really try to de-institutionalize. But also this idea that New York is such a diverse place, but the systemic racism is very visible at the same time, also because of its diversity somehow. So what I wanted to ask you next somewhat in this idea of sort of exposing systemic discrimination, supporting the work of women curators and independent curators, which is also somehow, you know, multiple universes that come together at the same time, of immigrant artists of color. So you're tackling a whole series of discriminations. And yesterday you used an expression that really resonated with me, which is that of upsetting the status quo somehow, no? So you're doing this through programs, but also you're doing this by changing the discourse somewhat. So I wanted to ask you whether you can share any examples or of specific programs or moments, you know, of how you articulated that vision through the things that Assembly Room does that really, you know, showed kind of, you know, in transparency how these mechanisms are there. They're very much alive. They're very powerful, and sort of how you're working through programs in a programmatic way, you know, not only through the vision and the methodology, but also through the content, to somehow dismantle all of this, or at least to expose and reconstruct from somewhere else.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that, a lot of the impetus and the directions of the organization, I think, just came from our experiences. We just kind of drew on our experiences as being women coming from different countries, working in the arts and the things we liked and didn't like, etc. And that was obviously tied to this larger context, but we really just sort of came together from that kind of personal into this larger political context. And so in terms of our programming, our curator meetups, our once a month meetups was an important part of our program. That's the first thing that we did. And we also have a career advancement program because we are, as independents, operating in different levels and experiences. And so there are some more mature experienced curators and there are some emerging curators and there's everything in between. And we also were wanting to respond to the group and what the needs of the group were, because that was our first priority, was to support, each other. And so the career advancement, was took the form of workshops around valuing our time and establishing fees and relationships, writing and pitching press announcements and press releases, contracts, consignments, copyrights, legal issues, and we'd get and invite people within our network and other women to have those talks. So, Julia Soleyev, who's at Soho House, Tess Thacker is an arts journalist, has written for many publications in New York City, and Betsy Dale was an attorney, and she, came and talked to the group as well. So we also realized that there are some gaps, between whether you graduate with an MFA in curating or whether you a self-taught curator and have been doing it for many years, that there are some gaps in just professional advancement and career experience that women were asking to fulfill in a space that was just friendly and affordable and, doable, an hour, 2 hours on a Saturday, etc. And then we also launched an open call. That was our third program, which is, to open up our space to proposals from curators in our community, outside of our community, to realize exhibitions, because that was also a way to build your profile, build your curatorial resume, have opportunities to curate and realize the shows that you have been researching, dreaming of, wanting to do, etc. And so those were the core programs, I would say. And so, yes, we do exhibitions, and, we have exhibitions on our site, and that part, I think, looks like a gallery program of exhibitions, because, we've done 10 exhibitions a year, and that's been a very robust program. But in fact, the three of us curate, we have the open call, we select curators from there, and that's how we develop our exhibition program. So at the center of that was really, the curatorial meetups, where we exchange information and have this informal check-in, and also other curators get to meet each other and to share and have ideas and maybe possibly collaborate with each other too. And I think collaboration has also been, I think collaboration is one of our programs too, because we're very dedicated to collaborating. And so we've done collaborations with organizations in our locality, where we were located on the Lower East Side, with other community organizations. And we also established relationships with other smaller galleries like us, so that was also an important part, like who is our broader community in the Lower East Side, who are the other women who are running galleries, who are the organizations that are serving, immigrant communities or the Asian community, or, and what are the issues that are important there for where we are, And I mean, honestly, we just went about doing our thing, and I think we knew why we were there, and we knew that this was important work to do, And we just did it. And I think our approach has never been to really, oh, we want to tear down society, we want to tear down the institutions, we want to march and protest, but that we want to do the work. However, I think that, in identifying as women, we do identify with those movements for women's rights, and in solidarity with other movements for equal rights. And so for us, women and women's empowerment also means, standing with others in that fight for empowerment. And I think now more than ever, this has really given us the, I think the energy and the passion to be more direct in our activism, and to be more direct in our advocacy. And I think in this 18 months, we were taking baby steps and, testing the waters and trying different things. But now I think we feel very emboldened by this to say, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. Like, why not? Like, if we are going to commit our resources, our time, our energy, our lives to something, what better than to empowering others, And so I think in the future and moving forward, that's definitely the direction we want to go in. And when I mentioned collaboration, and that also connects with the future, and we've built up so many collaborations in the past 18 months, and this is going to be a big part of our future, as we also collaborate with other organizations that are equally committed to these issues. Power Arts in New York City is also a group of an organization for women's empowerment in the arts in relation to salaries and professional opportunities. We are members of Art Table, and we've done, I've done a talk with Art Table as a guest curator, and that's also a women's organization. And so, that is, I think we see the strength in the collaborations and really forming a coalition and talking to each other, and being able to connect our communities and being able to share our opportunities and our resources, and inform one another, has been very exciting during this time. And that's where our collaboration with Art Curator Grid, arose, with Pauline Fussell, and discussions, and just a random chance meeting of her in New York City when she was visiting, the last time. And so, Art Fair is another collaboration we've realized with the curator, Kelly Schrewer, who's been part of that new online startup for artists to support younger artists. And I urge you all to check that out when you are in New York City, and it's a great app and tool to see who's out there and to meet artists and set up studio visits, etc. But so that has become a really huge part of what we do. And
we were talking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'll just sort of leave it there, because it's quite a lot to take in.
Well, I think that these are very important collaborations. And again, I'm going to share just our page, because people will find these links of these organizations you're mentioning now there in case they want to learn more about it. We were when talking about these collaborations, also about this idea of generosity, which I think is very important and rarely to be found in curatorship, like forging alliances rather than, excuse me, fostering competition is something that has to happen as a shift in the way in which we think about our work. And I was lucky enough to experience some of your meetings and see how you really create this expansion of the platform where one feels part of assembly room, but then Art Curator Grid comes in and you have access immediately to this other kind of tool, or art fair, like kind of sort of creating multiple echo chambers for the work, to be done and expanded over and over again. So this idea of generosity, I think, is very important. And in one of these conversations, I also heard you mention something that I feel, again, it's very central. It resonated a lot with me, because you're talking about discrimination and sort of how the system needs to be exposed, and how to work within that in other ways. And so we talk also about not only race or gender, but we also talk about class and labor and what it is that we do and how we do it, which I think is very important, sometimes more important than only what we do. And you mentioned this, that if we claim transparency, like if we say that transparency is important to our work, then we have to behave somehow coherently with that notion. And you were talking about this in the sense of sort of tracing the clear genealogies of where our opportunities and as independent curators come from, what is the situation about remuneration, like really creating a field that is as horizontal as possible, so that, again, privileges get exposed and there is, again, a degree of transparency of how we're getting paid, if we're getting paid, sort of what are all these connections and these movements that are so central to being able to work, to do our work. So I just wanted to bring this to the table because I think it's an important thought, and just ask you to kind of comment or expand on that, because I felt it was a very powerful statement in that context.
Thank you. So if we understand, if we understand that the whole system, of social and political power is problematic and, biased towards people of color and women and queer folk, and, anyone who is not white and part of the dominant culture, basically. If we understand that as the field within which we are working, right, then I think one of the very important things I learned from, growing up in South Africa under apartheid was that the system will always try to divide us, and it will try to divide us in ways that we don't even know we are being driven apart, right? And so I think that as an antidote to that, these ideas around generosity, around transparency, around sharing, around empowering ourselves and others, it's we want to lift ourselves and others as well, around collaboration, I think that's kind of the antidote to the kind of competition that the system, especially in the art world, this, and in general, I mean, capitalism produces a system that is, that pits people against each other, and you're always competing for jobs, for opportunities, for housing, for whatever it is, and so I think that as a way to counter that, we create a space where these values are shared and promoted and lived, so we create a space that says, in this space we share, we collaborate, we talk, we can argue, we can respectfully disagree, and we listen, and we listen to each other, and if there's something that we can do about what the group needs or what people need, then we do that, if that's within our power to do, or we talk to others who we think can help us do that, etc. So I do think that is the antidote to the system, but I also think that just speaking up is also important, and being in a space where you feel safe enough to speak up is even more important, because I think we often look at our colleagues in institutions, and we think, oh, well, they have this job security, and, they have the institutional support and the resources to do amazing extensions over time, and they have travel budgets, and, there's this wonderful situation. And I think what we've also seen is just how problematic those institutions are, and we are starting to hear curators speak up as well about the situation within that institutions and the situations they have confronted. So I think, making sure that we can support each other in speaking up and speak up in productive ways, and constructive ways, and offer directions and ways forward, is also, part of what we hope to achieve, is that women will also feel empowered to, ask for what they need and how much they need, and participate in an empowered way. And a lot of this draws on, for us, this just, men with this kind of dominant and controlling and destructive, kind of behavior, that's out. We that time is over and is up. As I think it was Oprah who famously said, "Time's up." But we need to feel empowered to do that, right? And to support each other in doing that, and to make sure that that if we are working in a gallery together, that I have your back, that and that you have mine. So I think that the antidote to a lot of these, normal ways of doing business and normal ways of going about things, and then just you kind of bitch and moan about it to your friends or your partner or your mom or whoever will listen, is just not acceptable. And that there are other ways of doing things that I think are more aligned with who we see ourselves to be, who we want to be, and, with the difference that we can make in culture. Because our practice, what we do, is we tell stories, and, there are all these amazing artists of color, women artists, queer artists, artists from all around the world. And, we don't just organize exhibitions, we participate in culture, we put things out in culture. And so we have a voice, and, we can make statements and we can make arguments through gathering together artists and artworks that, say something really important. So just looking around and, seeing like what are the stories that I'm telling, who am I supporting through my practice, what do I want to achieve when I look back in 5 to 10 years at my exhibitions, what is most important for me to see, and I think it's good to do that exercise every 2 or 3 years, is to say, well, let me look back, and see what are the shows that I've done, what are the talks I've participated in, what are the organizations I'm a member of, and is this in alignment with who I am and what I believe in and how I want to participate,
Of course. And I think that what you're talking about, again, is very important, is also the hows, no? Like, what is one level and then the hows is the other, so that acknowledging, and this is, of course, it's ever shifting terrain, but as curators, acknowledging one's position of power, I think it's very important, because then you can either continue to replicate the systems of power, or you kind of start to dismantle and open up to what you've been describing, which is what I try to bring up as much as possible in this context of these series of talks, which is the idea of communities of care. Like taking care of artists and publics and colleagues in the infrastructure itself, not from a position of power, but from a position really of synergy, which I think it's very hard to achieve, but very important as well.
Yeah, and I think that, like, no matter at what stage of your career you are at, I think you still have to ask what is you still have to recognize your privilege, to have an education, to have a home, to be able to ride a subway, to be able to make a living on what you do, even if you kind of having to hustle. It's that we still have a lot of privileges, and how do we use those privileges to what end? I think that it's not only about having power or having money, and of course you can achieve, incredible things, but you can also achieve incredible things with, as you say, with generosity, with care, and with your experience. Our experiences that we've had have such value, and those are things we can share, and I feel is compatible to, other forms of currency. I think those are also powerful currencies that we have. And, you know, we have to always remember, yeah, we serve artists, but we also serve publics and audiences, and, you know, who are the publics and audiences we want to serve, or who are the audiences we want to create, because we create our audience as well. Our audience isn't just ready-made there, you know, waiting for us to do a show, right? But we participate in that. And one of the really exemplary examples of an organization who, you know, in New York City has dedicated itself to creating a new public for art and a different public is Recess, RECE Recess Arts, and that is their mission, you know, and they have a predominantly Black audience that they serve, you know, unapologetically. And although they're not a culturally specific organization like, say, the Studio Museum in Harlem, that has as its mandate to serve that community from which the museum arose, Recess is an organization that's committed to just developing a new public, a different public from the mainstream art public in New York City, you know. And so I think that's an important question for us to ask too, is just not just when we look back what we've done and who we serve, but also how we can create audiences and shape culture, and through shaping culture also shape society, because I think we have so much more freedom in the realm of culture than, you know, if we were perhaps in other fields, you know.
Definitely. And sort of, I wanted to then move on to also another topic that I feel it's always very present, especially for independent spaces, especially for independent practice, which is somehow, in a broad sense, that of sustainability. So I wanted to talk about challenges, because this is a very important work, but it is a very challenging environment, I feel, all over, like internationally, but also New York especially. So what I wanted to ask is sort of how you structured your organization so that it can function and can be sustainable logistically and financially, and how you do so in a city like New York, which is extremely gentrified. It really changes from one year to the other, has, I guess this is my personal opinion, but very poor rent regulation. So like it's not a city that really protects the people who live and do the work there. So how do you survive as a space? We've seen so many space wiped out in the last few years, especially in sort of in the Lower East Side, where you've been working as well. So what is your sustainability model? How do you tackle all these challenges at once?
Let's see, where to begin? I think that, you know, the first question we asked ourselves, or we had to deal with, is, you know, what can we afford to do? How much of our resources, how much of our incomes can we put aside for our organization? How much time can we put aside, you know, just to really do a kind of inventory for ourselves, what is possible for each of us to contribute in terms of time, in terms of energy, in terms of commitment, resources, all of that. And then come up with, you know, some parameters, you know, okay, this is what we have, so what can we do with what we have? So that was a very important question for us, because we all have, you know, day jobs, and we work, and we have families, and we have a lot of other commitments too. So that was the first question. And then the second level was, you know, who in our networks and amongst our collaborators and partners and friends, etc., can we draw on to also support us, you know? And so again, that economy of DIY, helping each other out, support, community, drawing on, you know, friends, family, professional colleagues, was another resource. And so when it came to designing our website, you know, that was someone that was within Yulia's network, you know, that she'd worked with before, and who said, I'll be happy to do this for you guys at a super discounted rate. And she sat down and she found ways that and this was her sort of, you know, side project from her main job, you know? And so there was a lot of support in that way too. You know, a friend who was an attorney looked at all the legal documents, you know, and made sure that we had all of that sorted out. And so that was the sort of second level of, you know, making the organization happen. And then so everything is self-organizing and self-funded. Each of the founders contributes from our own incomes a certain amount of money. We also contribute time, and we share tasks and responsibilities as well. And the way we work is, you know, there's 3 of us, so we can often divide things up and get things done. And sometimes all of us will work on one thing, and we just kind of play it by ear. But, you know, when I did really big shows full time, you know, Julia and Paula really stepped up, and, you know, I couldn't be present as much. When, you know, anything happens that prevents one of us from being fully on, the other 2 can step in and compensate. So, you know, there's an advantage to the fact that we are a team, you know, and we can work remotely from anywhere. You know, if Julia's in Russia visiting her parents, we still get a show done. You know, if I'm in South Africa visiting my family, we still get things done. And the same with Paula. If Paula goes to Italy, you know, she's still working and we're still chatting. And that's been the wonderful benefits of, you know, the internet and WhatsApp and all these forms of communication that we have. So that's how we kind of grew the organization. And those 2 things were those are the 2 things that I think sustain us. It's our own contribution, but then it's also the people around us who support us, you know, and who have, and that support has been in so many different ways, you know. So it's somebody writing something, it's somebody, you know, buying an artwork as well, you know. It's artists and their friends who, you know, artists bring their whole community to openings, to gatherings. They bring their collectors, and so these are the sort of 2, you know, concentric circles that makes the organization work and function. And so during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic hit, I mean, it was a big change and challenge for us too, you know, because we just opened an exhibition and we had to close the show. But, you know, in the end, we were actually able to just continue our program and continue our work because we could take it all online. So our monthly meetups became bi-weekly meetups. You know, curators were like, we need to talk, we need to see each other. How are we going to get through this? You know, people were being fired and laid off their jobs, and so much uncertainty out there, health-wise, employment-wise. I mean, the landscape of New York City is just total crisis, you know. And so we increased those meetings and those gatherings to support people. And then again, we had an Insta video program. You know, we had online presentations. I won't say exhibitions because they were really features and promoting just women artists we've worked with before, just to, you know, get them out there, give them visibility, maybe have some sales, support them in some way. And then we had these wonderful collaborations coming out of that, you know. And in that process, I think we realized that we are not so dependent on our space. And in fact, we are doing so much more not having a space and not being inside a space, because the space also, when you talk about challenges of running an organization, is that once you have an actual physical space, that becomes very demanding too, you know. And that's besides the other components. You know, you have your programming, you have your space to maintain, you have your finances to take care of. So, you know, it's a lot of responsibility. And, you know, in future, we will shift to a more nomadic structure for our shows, because we've formed all these partnerships and collaborations. So we have some Lower East Side galleries that are run by women who have been keen to collaborate and do something. Galleries don't always program, you know, January to December. So, you know, we've had women say, look, you know, I have September free, or I have some part of the summer free, and we'd love to work with you guys. We've also have non-for-profit a discussion with a non-for-profit who runs a lot of spaces in the city, and they're looking for a curatorial partner, and so we would have a space and curatorial partnership. So a lot of wonderful things have come out of this crisis for us, but again, all those things are connected to these communities and other like-minded organizations like us, small served communities, and just are scattered throughout New York City. And so I think we feel very optimistic that we could actually do more. We could actually do more. We could select more curators from our open call. We could also do more impactful shows even if we wanted to do 3 shows a year. We could say, well, look, we only want to do 3 shows, and we want them to be really impactful, and we want to have time to fundraise for our shows, to pay curators stipends, to pay artists fees, to have budgets for exhibition. Like right now, it's whatever we feel we want it to be. And so we are in this moment where we are also we have a once a year sort of retreat, where we sit down and we think about what worked in the past year, what hasn't worked, what do we want to do more of, what do we want to do less of, and we're all kind of in that moment now. And so it's been really positive for us. The crisis has been really positive because it has made us see, oh, actually, these are the most important things, and these are the things we want to carry on. And maybe we'll have another space again, in the future. But the fact that we can both have a space and not have a space and have a space again is, I think, part of what keeps us flexible and nimble. We could do a show in my apartment, that's possible too. So it's just continuing to think outside the box, adapt, be flexible. And because we are small, and because we are women run, and because we are nimble, we can adapt faster.
I think it's super interesting, this idea that somehow when a crisis comes, then models become somehow more lean, no? Like there's such a deep analysis that allows you to kind of shave off what it's not really necessary at that time. And I think because as we were preparing also this talk, I was mentioning how we're always trying to bring forward this idea of strategies and tools, like things that people can sort of take away with them at the end of the conversation. In this sense, I also find very, very interesting and important to keep in mind how when you design strategically the methodology, through which the organization operates and unfolds, so this idea of collaborations that kind of then lead the way, but there's a design behind, there's the methodology that the 3 of you had set from day one of Assembly Room, that is somewhat automatically and spontaneously opening new paths, because you find your peers, you find the people that are like-minded, the allies, the people, really that network of trust and support that we were talking about before. So we're almost running out of time. It always goes by very quickly. So I encourage everybody who's watching and listening to start sharing their questions for Natasha. So please don't be shy and just use the comment section. But Natasha, before we jump to that, I wanted to ask you about, or at least mention something that I think is very important, because inevitably we all have followed the hold on, I'll let him, don't worry, it's okay.
Sorry about the dog. And
we were commenting how sort of this is also an invasive practice, because we're all in the private space of our homes or temporary homes or whatever. This is not a TV studio, so it's great and fun to have light kind of come through.
Indeed. I want to also be clear, that on the challenges of starting anything and having any kind of building anything, every step of the way there are challenges for sure, financial, stressful, like programmatic, whatever. There will be all these challenges. It's important to find people that you like. Can
we lost you for a moment.
So I was going to say that, at every step of the way, there are these challenges, but I want to say that what gets you through the challenges is, one, you find people you like and you want to work with, and you can work together. That's important, especially since you're in the independent world and you're much more free. So that has to be important. You want to work with people you like and get along with and share a commitment with and can have fun with and really share this passion, and there will be challenges every single step of the way, but together you have to find creative ways to deal with them. And we've found that it's not about compromise. I don't think any of us compromise. What we do is we find a solution that works for everyone, and we know we found the solution when we all agree that's it. Like, we all know that's the way forward, and we'll debate it, and I'll have this idea, you'll have. But in the end, we always find what I call the third way, and for me, that is not about compromise. That is simply about really drawing on your strength as women and your intuition and your experience, to navigate that. And the outcome is always something that feels really good and right to everyone, for us, the goals come out of the challenges. The directions come out of the challenges. We know we need to raise money, find funding, find a kind of financial structure that works for us, that can really keep the organization going, that can sustain us. We this is all unpaid work right now that we do, and so we know that's a goal and that's a future to work towards, but welcome the challenges and welcome the solutions to them, because that is going to help you define your future goals and teach you where you need more support, where you need, to let go of certain things and take on other things. And so we've approached it very intuitively, as well as bringing our experience together, and I guess because we've created that space where we can be a little intuitive and more responsive and more creative and, more easygoing, but we also have this incredible experience, professional experience behind us. So once we make a decision, we make it happen like that, and so that's one of the most important things I would say in forming an organization. Anything you do is, and maybe you start off and it's not the right team or not the right group or not, and that's okay. You can,
Yes.
you just have to understand that it's going to be nonstop challenges, but coming back to the difference between being small and nimble and maybe a little bit less dependent on, donors and board, etc., is that when you look at the big institutions, they've suffered tremendous losses, billions, millions, staff have been laid off. It's really going to take 3 years or so for major institutions to recover. The mid-level institutions are probably going to survive this, and the smaller institutions do. In the gallery world, I think that's very different. I think smaller galleries have suffered tremendously. And as you said, in New York City, rents, not lots of landlords have been forgiving around rents, and galleries have had to negotiate. Oh, I'll pay this month. Maybe I can get 25% off next month, and maybe for the third month I can, or I can get 25% off for the rest of the year. The negotiations that galleries have made with their landlords vary. There hasn't been a standard, saying this is what the law says, or this is how you'll be protected, or this is what everybody will contribute. It has been one-on-one negotiations, and we are members of the New Art Dealers Association, which is the NADA group in the Lower East Side. And so, we are in conversation and we see what's happening around us, and it will be a very different situation.
Of course. So I wanted to wrap up with a question that really relates to everything we've been discussing, but also to the historical moment, which, as we've been saying, is really, really crucial. And with the fact that we are aware that sort of developing a conversation series like this cannot be detached from acknowledging what is happening in the present moment. So we have all been following, I guess, very, very closely the events and the urgent conversations that have been taking place in the United States over the last weeks, the urgent actions against systemic racism. And we said already that the curatorial work that you and Assembly Room do really stands at the center of this issue. So I wanted to ask you, and I know I have some elements ready that you shared with me in advance, but if you want to just talk for a moment, for those who might not necessarily be familiar with the context of New York or the United States, kind of to mention, and as we said before, amplify the work of other organizations or resources that could help people understand or read more, understand better, or even support if they can. Also because, as we said, it is an ongoing struggle and it's the project of a lifetime. So we should make sure that it's not something that just for those who live and work outside of the United States, it's not just social media momentum. It should not lose momentum. It's an ongoing struggle, and certain goals should be sort of reached. So had any resources or things that you wanted to share in this context, or any thoughts really for people, again, who might not know or be super familiar with the conversations taking place, or that might want to just learn more somehow?
Yeah. So yeah, I've shared with Ilaria a couple of
I'm gonna do one
resources
with Artsy, or which one?
Yeah. So Artsy published a really nice collection of resources in the art world that and sort of made this pledge as well to support systemic change in the art industry, and so that's a big conversation right now, and different groups, Art Table, Association of Art Museum Curators, are having, the New York Times just had an article about Black gallerists. So I think this gives you this is a really nice selection of debates and the articles that are circulating in the art world right now. And what's really, for me, powerful about this moment is that we are speaking in clear and bold language. We are speaking about Black artists. We are speaking about racism. We are not using euphemisms like multiculturalism and identity politics, and that the language is very clear that there's a systemic problem within the arts as well, and that on the level of boards, on the level of donors, on the level of audiences, on the level of just staff hires, and biases. Our biases weave their way into our work and our institutions and our day-to-day interactions. So that gives a sense of the debates. And then there's another really nice resource guide that is around Black liberation, and so that is about the larger struggle on 60, which is an online 60 Inches from Center, which is an online magazine dealing with sort of off-center issues, and they also published more social demands and tools from Black and people of color artists and organizations that have been just collected. So I think this one is so thorough and covers all aspects, because I know it's quite overwhelming to think, for us too, it's overwhelming, gosh, there's so much that needs changing out there, and there's so many organizations and individuals that need our support. How do we navigate that world? So I think these two resources will give you a really great overview in the arts and in society in general. In terms of the ongoing struggles, against racism and sexism and just economic discrimination too, and violence against brown bodies everywhere, his past, present, future, that I think each person has to ask themselves what they can do in their lives, and from their location, that is the work for all of us is to figure out, how can I, in small ways, in daily ways, stay conscious and aware and critical and make the small changes, whether that's a mind shift, an attitude shift, or even in the workplace, or we just communicating. But I just think that we all have to ask that question, what it is within our remit to do. And we all, there's not a one size fits all. It's everybody really has to figure that out for themselves and commit to doing that work on a daily basis. Because as I was sharing with you the other day, that when you're a person of color, racism has become just like when natural, right? It's natural. My strategies for coping, adapting, growing up in a racist environment have become natural. Even for me to think about what could I say to you that could, help you is, well, I mean, I don't know, like when your whole entire being and life is about living in this world and navigating this world, it becomes so subconscious, that it takes a minute to sit down and say, yeah, well, like even analyzing your own life and looking back in your own life and saying, oh, so that's what that experience was. Oh, so that's what actually was really happening in that job. It's not easy. I also have to develop the kind of critical skills to do that and to navigate that world. But it becomes seamless because that's the world that I was born into and that I had to just navigate, from a very young age. So it's become very natural. But on the flip side, it's racism is very natural for people who are racist too. They also have to kind of understand how some of the natural assumptions are not natural at all, and how to challenge that and how to deal with that. And that's, the work that they have to do. So I think, just starting from where you are and starting from where you are, in which city you are, in which family you are, like you have to start somewhere. You start from where you are,
Thank you, Natasha. Definitely. And it is incredibly helpful. And coming from sort of, as you were saying, like an individual perspective, the other thing that I wanted to briefly share for those who might be interested out there, and I'm sharing this at a very personal level because I found it very helpful for me, and I'll just share it very briefly, is this ongoing talk series that curator Helen Molesworth has initiated on Zoom. It's a group that is called White Women 2020, and it's basically a seminar that takes place every week. Whoever wants to join is welcome to, and it's really about self-educating and understanding what systemic racism is, how we can sort of deconstruct certain elements from positions of privilege that we may have as women and as white women. So here you can see the email. It's very simple. Just by emailing whitewomen2020@gmail.com, one receives the link to join. And it's really a study group. And I think from my experience, it has been very helpful so far in really studying and getting deeper. And as you're saying, not asking for people who already are part, and kind of victimized in this system of racism and have to struggle with that in their daily life every day, but instead doing the work on one's own and kind of making the effort of understanding.
Yeah, and I think, it's also about using your past or current privileges, to like you use that to do something really empowering for yourself and for others with that. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you have to figure out, from here on moving forward, there's no excuse for anyone not knowing, not understanding, etc. We have all these resources to share. We are able to connect in these ways, and that's been amazing too, is that the online communities, the discussions taking place on our platform, the internet is finally living up to the expectation that we had in the 90s, that it would, bring people together and be more of a global community. And now we really see the power of the internet in helping us become those kinds of global communities for social change, and that same initiative by Helen Molesworth is also being translated she's also working with another artist and other people in institutions to develop a resource guide for institutions as well. You know, how institutions can address this on the micro level as well as macro level.
Of course.
And so I think these are all like really wonderful, amazing initiatives that have come out of this time. And yeah, we absolutely have to keep it moving forward and keep it in the forefront, you know. And I think moving forward, that's what Assembly Room is. You know, it's definitely on our horizon to make this mandate more present and more focused, and to, you know, keep just like disrupting, you know, and keep, we shouldn't be comfortable anymore, you know, and to keep that discomfort and to keep that agitation and to keep, you know, until we can all kind of take it easy, you know, when we've reached some of these bigger goals for everyone, for our whole society. And I really hope that everyone can also kind of see the benefit for themselves in that, you know. It's that we don't need to be divided and compete with each other always, and, you know, that this is about kind of raising everybody, you know, raising ourselves and raising up everyone else too, and that there are these other ways of you know, being and doing in the world that are more generous and compassionate and active, you know, also.
Definitely. Thank you, Natasha. So we are running out of time, but we have one question, and in the comments, I will share these with you after the talk, but there was a lot of excitement about you speaking about the things you said, of course. And we have this question, which I find very interesting, by Sylvia, who asks how you manage to foster the links with your home country without letting it become the main focus of your work, or confining the network and projects, which I think it's a very interesting, very, very good and interesting question. So thanks, Sylvia, for this.
I mean, this is, you know, this is a challenge, Sylvia, because you know, South Africa was so formative for me growing up there, and I grew up with such a sense of social responsibility, actually, that I think my relationship to South Africa is about that. I feel somehow responsible to give back, to do something, and sometimes I don't know what that is, you know. Sometimes I don't know, well, what could I do? And so I try different things over this, you know, 16, 17 years. I've tried different things to keep that connection, but also to share. And now I sort of, at the same time, I also had to have this responsibility because of where I am, you know, that I do live in the US now, and I am part of this other country, and I am part of this community and the city, you know, and I think many of us define ourselves through the cities we come from. You know, I'm a Cape Townian and I'm a New Yorker, you know. And so I've had to kind of figure that out in both places. And of course, my family is in South Africa, and that is a strong link and connection for me. But I always thought I'd find this one thing, you know, that I could do in South Africa. And then I'd find this one thing that I could do in the US, and those would be my things, you know. But because things are always changing, you know, communities are changing, societies are changing, generations of artists, you know, I've seen now 3 generations of artists since I grew up there. And because things are always changing, I've also just rolled with the changes, and I do what I can, you know. But the scale of things differs. Sometimes it's simply just advising someone who's considering studying a PhD in the US, someone from South Africa, and it's just talking to that person about what the process is, what are the things to look out for, what are the things to watch for, not to make the same mistakes that I maybe made, you know, just sharing that. And, you know, the other day I got an email from someone, which is why I'm using this example, saying, thanks so much. I got into these universities and I'm going to the school, and your advice was really valuable. And to me, that felt like, oh, I helped somebody, And sometimes it's something massive, like this Underline show that I collaborated on with 2 other women in South Africa. And we did it, and it was incredibly challenging to do, and we made it happen, and it happened, and it was amazing, but it was incredibly challenging to do given the space and where I am. And I might not do something like that again. I might instead focus on something much smaller, and education has become very important to me, so it's been a process of refining, where do I fit in? What could I do? What is manageable there and here, because both are important to me. And so, yeah, it's just, I just figured it out, but I have a tendency to take on more than I can handle. So, I do have to kind of sometimes just check myself and say, okay, maybe. But I think I'm just searching, I'm just continually searching and learning and, trying to respond. And so it can get out of hand sometimes, but I have good friends and a partner and so on to tell me when that's happening,
Well, Natasha, thank you so, so much. I think this was wonderful. And I'm very glad that we had a lot of people staying with us throughout this. I'm going to share just one last time. And I'm going to remind everyone that all the links and resources and organizations that we've mentioned during the talk will be on the Call for Curator talk page, on Natasha's page, which you can find at this URL. And again, for whoever wants to follow up with Natasha for a question or anything, again, feel free to write to us. This is the email address. And we will be happy to pass on your message to her. So it's important for us to also serve as a bridge and make sure that the conversation, if needed, if sort of there is a will, doesn't just gets cut right away here as soon as we end the live stream. So thank you, all of you, for joining us. And we will be back next Tuesday, again, same time, which is 6:30 p.m. Central European time. And we will announce our speaker this week. So stay tuned, or if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, again, you can do so on the homepage of the talk series of Call for Curators. So Natasha, thank you so much. Thank you and everybody at Assembly Room. And we all look forward to staying up to date on the amazing projects you guys are going to develop in the years to come. And thank you so much for all the work you've been doing so far.
Thank you.
I have benefited from it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us and for creating the space. And please, anytime you're in New York City, come and see us, join our meetups, come gather with us at Assembly Room.
Yes, I really encourage everyone to join this amazing group. So thanks again, Natasha, and take care, everyone.
Take care,
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.